Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to what we hope will be an informative session, sparking good ideas, and to get you thinking about what your courses can look like. World Strides offers an educational element in everything we do, and this reinforces our mission. My name is Randy Chapman, and I am a member of the Curriculum and Academics team, and I have been with World Strides since 2016. I received my master's in teaching in secondary English education from the University of Virginia, and I taught high school English for 8 years. My role today is to introduce the benefits and strategies of using pop culture as a way to reach your students. Vanessa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Vanessa James. I'm a teammate of Randy's on the Curriculum and Academics team. I have a Master's of Arts in Teaching and a Master's in History. I've taught history, literature, and civics in public schools and was also a private tutor to American international students. I'm passionate about bringing hardworking resources to educators and bringing them professional development. I'm excited to be talking about pop culture in the classroom today.
We all have different interests, habits, and passions. We all come from different areas, we were born in different decades, and we have drastically different backgrounds. Think about this. How many of you are confident that you know pop culture? Teachers are educated, hardworking, critical observers, critical thinkers, and yet sometimes we don't feel confident with pop culture. But we think it's time to give yourself some credit. You see and experience a massive amount of what is considered popular to your students every single day. Just think about how your students lovingly tease you when you don't know the latest song or dance craze, and then they try to teach you. So really, you know more than you think. Today, while you may be here for the bottom two bullets that you see on the screen, we must discuss the what and the why of pop culture first. And I would strongly encourage you to do this with your students as well. So we will address the following. What is pop culture? Why use pop culture? How do we use pop culture in our classrooms? And how do we use pop culture to prepare our students for programs in the field, especially whenever they are traveling? Hopefully, by the end of the session, we will understand that bringing pop culture into the classroom isn't just about being cool. We will understand how incorporating pop culture into your lessons will bring your content to life in a meaningful way. We will draw on your students' out-of-school texts, practices, and interests. We will know how to incorporate pop culture into a variety of different content areas and subjects. And we will recognize how pop culture varies throughout the country and the world and what this means for building the global awareness of our students. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Yeah, and as we talk about pop culture, I'd encourage our viewers to think about their own pop culture consumption by answering these questions. What are you watching? What are you listening to? What websites or social media sites are you visiting? And Randy's going to tell us about what pop culture actually is as you think about that.
Thanks, Vanessa. Pop culture can be roughly defined as the tastes, interests, views, and preferences of a society at a given point in time. It is known to be the culture of the people, and it accounts for the interactions between people and their everyday activities, clothes, slang, media, food, and rituals. We can see those interactions and interests on social media every day. A quick examination on any social media platform will give insight to what is popular, from celebrity legal issues to can't miss television and movies to the latest viral video. These references highlight how pop culture is the interests and preferences of a society at a given point in time. So what exactly is pop culture? One of the most confounding things about pop culture is defining it. So let's take a look at a few attempts at defining pop culture from some various sources. If you Google pop culture, the first definition that comes up is from the Oxford English Dictionary, defining it as, quote, culture transmitted via the mass media and aimed particularly at younger people. The Cambridge Dictionary, not to be outdone by their academic rivals, takes a slightly different tact, defining popular culture as, quote, music, TV, cinema, books, etc., that are popular and enjoyed by ordinary people rather than experts or very educated people. Now, I imagine that most of you listening today, including myself, would consider ourselves to be educated people who are also quite ordinary, whatever that actually means. So when I came across both of these definitions, I was a bit taken aback by them. And I think it just goes to show you how difficult it is to define pop culture and how baffling the whole concept can be to some people. I also think that both of these definitions can be illuminating in ways that perhaps the writers of the definitions did not intend. Is pop culture only for young people or the ordinary, non-educated? So the final definition is from a website called ThoughtCo, and they take a slightly a slightly softer stance. They say the accumulation of culture products such as music, art, literature, fashion, dance, film, cyberculture, television, and radio that are consumed by the majority of a society's population. Popular culture has mass accessibility and appeal. Traditionally, it was associated with lower classes and poor education, as opposed to the quote unquote official culture of the upper class. So as you're listening, I want you to think about which of these definitions resonates with you. Do you particularly like the one from the Oxford English Dictionary? Or how about the Cambridge Dictionary? Or what about the one from ThoughtCo? Based on these definitions, it seems like pop culture is often looked down upon by academics and serious educators, but it doesn't have to be. Also, keep in mind that pop culture does not always have to mean the latest and newest trends. If you take a long view of popular culture as reflective of culture and history, we can have a better understanding of what it means to call something pop culture. If you think about it, Shakespeare was considered the pop culture of his time. Vanessa, can you explain who has the awesome power of deciding what is popular?
Yes, I love that last definition, Randy. Who does decide what is popular? Well, firstly, it's important to note concepts of pop culture will vary. Firstly, they'll vary by age group. Now, does that mean that pop culture is only for the young? No, I think we can make a pretty strong argument against that, while also recognizing our students will have a different pop culture experience than us. So don't be afraid to think about these topics through the eyes of your students. Concepts of pop culture will also vary based on economics, geography, technology, proficiency, and access. But that being said, it won't really vary as much as pop culture used to because of the prevalence of social media, as we are about to see. So about popularity, there's something called the 50 million user rule. It says that once a medium or a cultural artifact reaches 50 million users, it is said to have penetrated society as a cultural norm. This impacts the way we give and receive information and the speed at which we do so. So let's look at an example. Radio. Radio took 40 years to reach the milestone of 50 million users. And with radio, we were and still are the receivers of information. So I remember my grandparents telling me about how they would sit around the radio, right? They'd listen to soap operas, they'd listen to baseball games, and that's how they were consuming pop culture in the first half of the 20th century. But fast forward to telephones. Telephones only take 20 years to reach the 50 million user rule. It's accelerating. And as technology improved, so did the way that we communicated. Telephones, as we know, allow us to both give and receive information from family and friends. And even faster, we have television. With TV, we are still receivers of information, but because TVs became so prevalent in a shorter amount of time, they allowed pop culture to move more quickly and spread more widely than ever before. And Facebook, MySpace, blogs, iPods, who remembers MySpace? This only took 2 years, all of these platforms to reach 50 million users. And even though there's a few different mediums here, we can see how technological advances and the prevalence of social media have changed how we give and how we receive information, as we've now added in visual cues through photographs, videos, whatever we want to share. And there's also another important shift happening. We now have some control over the information that is being exchanged. Fast forward to YouTube, which only took a few months. And it's hard to imagine a world without YouTube. You're probably viewing this on YouTube right now. It's another way we both give and receive information. We can maintain control over our own messages as well. With it, you have people choosing, and this is the important piece here, choosing what is popular. That like button can be quite powerful. The 50 million user rule examples show the role mass media can have in shaping culture. Let's take a closer look at the media form of music videos, for example, since we were just talking about YouTube. The advent of MTV during a time when TVs had become extremely prevalent allowed the music video, as they say, to kill the radio star. But later, we have the internet killing the video star, thanks in part to MP3s and online streaming. And then coming all the way back around, YouTube reaching 50 million users in just a couple of months, and music videos, again, explode. In fact, 28 of the 30 most watched videos on YouTube are music videos. I think this example really highlights the way our consumption of pop culture has changed, and you could even say that it is cyclical.
Thanks, Vanessa. I agree. There is actually an academic term that comes from sociology called the social cycle theory. As humans, we make meaning by identifying patterns that reflect our behaviors. And in many ways, culture reflects the way society is structured. Culture reflects our wants, our desires, and our fears. Like many pop culture patterns, some aspects of this phenomenon are intentional, and some aspects are an organic product of the personal histories of the creators involved. We see this now as trends from the 1980s and 1990s have come roaring back. The late Princess Diana's fashion influence is popular again as people break out their oversized varsity sweaters, their mom jeans, or their bike shorts, and the whimsical knits like her famous black sheep sweater. J.Lo has returned to the arms of Ben Affleck, and television reunions such as Friends and Sex and the City continue to provide comfort, laughter, and entertainment. And these are just a few of the many examples of everything old being new again. So with the growth of social media in particular, pop culture has become more than just the media products that we consume, but also something that we participate in. These images capture recent social media behavior, and it is especially interesting to consider this in light of the pandemic. Many of us have found that we are using social media now more than ever before. The first chart I'd like us to take a look at was that it's the one on the left. It was compiled by a company called Data Reportal in partnership with Hootsuite and We Are Social. And what we are seeing here are the most popular social media apps ranked according to the number of monthly active users on the platform. Those numbers are in millions. So these numbers are updated as of October 2021. We can see that Facebook is the platform with the highest number of monthly active users at more than 2.8 billion users. And if current trends continue, Facebook will soon eclipse 3 billion users. YouTube is second on the list with 2.2 billion monthly active users. WhatsApp and Instagram, which of course are both owned by Meta, report 2 billion and 1.3 billion monthly active users respectively. And TikTok has 1 billion monthly active users. And you can see that it was the most downloaded non-gaming app in June of 2021 with more than 65 million installs. That's a lot. These are all at the top in terms of user engagement. Finally, some platforms like Snapchat, Twitter, and Pinterest have been gaining in users, but can still be found near the bottom half of the list, ranging from 436 million to just more than 538 million active monthly users. But that's still a lot of monthly active users. Of course, even with these rankings and the conclusions we might draw from them, we should keep in mind that social media users are not confined to a single platform. And there is plenty of content that is shared across multiple sites. For instance, even if you don't have an account on TikTok, you may have seen a TikTok video on Twitter or Instagram, or even a compilation of TikTok videos on YouTube. Or maybe you've seen a photo with a Snapchat filter that someone posted on Facebook. So in many ways, to engage with one of these platforms is to engage with all of them. The other chart that you can see on the right is from Sensor Tower, and it shows the most downloaded apps worldwide for June of 2021. We can see that in terms of overall downloads, TikTok and Facebook were the two most downloaded apps. And in fact, Facebook's suite of products, including Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger, they all round out the top 5. And of course, Zoom maintains some download popularity. As we are discovering today, there is still a massive need for video conferencing apps. And all of these platforms are uniquely suited to keeping people connected. With so many social media apps and a variety of ways to share our daily lives, again, we can see how much we are in control of the content we post and the messaging we see. So the COVID-19 pandemic clearly demonstrates how the world can change quickly, and this has resulted in changes to our online behaviors and our habits as well. These trends make sense because when the pandemic kept us inside during lockdown, we often only had our screens to allow us to socialize. So let's take a quick look at our daily time spent with media. Internet users aged 16 to 64 are spending nearly 7 hours a day online across all their devices. These same users are spending almost 2.5 hours on social media alone. They are turning to social media and messenger apps as these both facilitate communication. People are also consuming more media in the form of music, games, and podcasts. Do you remember how popular Animal Crossing was at the very beginning of the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, the game became a pop culture playground. Users created custom design codes to dress their villagers and made them look like superheroes or Disney princesses or other iconic characters. And this even led to professional designers like Marc Jacobs and Valentino releasing custom clothing designs in the game, blurring the line between the digital and the real world. And we haven't even considered what the metaverse will bring us yet. These are all evidence of the changing landscape of our digital behavior and changes in the way that we can potentially engage with pop culture. So consider how some of your own digital activities and habits have changed. To ignore pop culture now would be to ignore a fundamental shift in how people are engaging with information and social groups online. And it would be to ignore a really great opportunity to highlight some of the shared experiences that we are all going through. So let's take a closer look at TikTok and Zoom. If we're thinking about pop culture, we can see that both of these platforms offer opportunities to engage with pop culture. TikTok, as we know, is especially famous for its dance challenges, and maybe you have participated in some yourself. TikTok videos are usually based on short clips of songs or other sound effects, which make it easy for users to upload their own takes on a popular dance or trend. And TikTok users, it uses a unique algorithm to curate the videos that show up in a user's feed. So the more you engage with the app, the more you see content that is tailored to you. This makes using TikTok a personalized experience because everyone's feeds will be slightly different. And maybe that's why our students like it so much. Have you used TikTok? I want you to think about why you use it or why you choose not to use it. For those of you who don't use TikTok, maybe consider how you can engage with pop culture while using Zoom. So with Zoom, one way to do this is to change your background. You may recognize these backgrounds from the Great British Bake Off, The Office, or The Simpsons. And by changing your background, you can showcase your favorite TV show or film, or even an iconic work of art. By doing that, you are expressing something about your pop culture preferences and telling others about your interests. A pro tip is to encourage your students to change their backgrounds to something they enjoy or something that aligns with your curriculum. And this can help you learn a little bit more about them. With each of these platforms, we can see how pop culture is employed as a form of self-expression. Social media can help people find others who share their interests in pop culture. Even with all of the disruption we've been experiencing in our lives, pop culture doesn't go away. In fact, it may be the case that it pervades our lives now more than ever before. When we express ourselves and communicate online, pop culture is often part of that communication. Vanessa, I am going to hand it over to you as we consider our students.
Thanks, Randy. That was an excellent point at the end. Let's shift our focus a little bit and think about how we engage with pop culture with our students in the classroom, and not just think about how we engage with it ourselves. So think about, why should we reference songs, apps, TV shows, sports that students know? I think you'll see that the reasons are really compelling. And the first reason I want to share with you is that pop culture can be used powerfully to strengthen your classroom culture. When you show interest in learning about something new, like pop culture, you can create a strong classroom culture of learning. Pop culture allows you to show that you don't know everything and your students get to teach. And students love to show their teachers that they know more about certain topics. We know that. So take those opportunities to flip your roles and embrace being the student for a change. And there's another level to all this, right? When you are the person who doesn't know something in the classroom, you're the one who is being vulnerable. And being vulnerable is powerful. Embracing moments when you are that person, it makes it okay to not know something. And imagine how often our students in the classroom feel like the ones who don't know something. You normalize that and you strengthen that classroom culture of learning. And that culture of learning is supported through other ways like building relationships and encouraging sharing through pop culture. Pop culture is a great way to build relationships with students because in the same way that you become closer to friends and family members by learning about their interests, becoming interested in pop culture can bring you closer to your students and allow you to understand more about what they like. You can learn about their interests. You can be truly involved in their world. While doing that, you also get to share your point of view of pop culture. So for example, if you're asking students to connect songs to themes in literature or history, share your own ideas and connections, and that makes that interaction more real, more authentic, and allows your students to get to know you a little bit better too, and that relationship building is strengthened. It also, using pop culture can also encourage sharing. So you can help to share students' interests with others, especially if you let them present their interests to the class. That is just disseminating that sharing throughout the room and is allowing that classroom culture to grow. It really opens the doors to opportunities to connect and engage our students to build a rich classroom culture. Something else I want to share with you is that pop culture can really be used to encourage learning. It can be a captivating avenue into your content area. You can use pop culture to capture those disinterested students. You want them to care about your content, right? Even if they don't love it. And I taught US history. I know it wasn't everybody's favorite, but using something like pop culture that your students are already interested in, that has a connection to your content, will get those disinterested students excited. So references to Assassin's Creed 3, which is a video game, made some of my students extremely interested in the American Revolution. Amazing for me. Quoting a chart-topping rap song about hard work allowed me to make an argument that Americans retain elements of Puritan culture. That really made my students sit up in their chairs. So that's a way to grab students. And then you can also use pop culture to encourage learning in that it can allow you to make connections between the classroom and society. And isn't that what we want? How are pop culture events prefigured by historical events, for example, might be something you might ask your students. How can themes that we study, such as revolution, courage, and discovery, be applicable to how we are living now? And how are the people we study in the classroom similar to pop stars? You might ask your students, if Jay Gatsby were alive today, would he try to nab Drake's Instagram handle of Champagne Poppy? I think he probably would. And to really enforce those connections, you can have your students annotate their daily work in their readings with text to world connections. Use those student-generated connections to then facilitate discussions and really reinforce those connections. You can also use pop culture in the classroom to hone thinking skills. Students are going to consume popular culture for the rest of their lives. So why not use pop culture to provide opportunities for students to practice thinking skills that we know are critical? For example, you can ask students to understand the message behind ads shown in the media. So Adidas has an ad campaign. It tells us impossible is nothing. Let's understand that. What does that mean? And then take them up the higher order thinking ladder. Ask them to then analyze that commercial. What can you infer from that same ad? What are the implications? And then getting even higher up, evaluate, ask them to evaluate social media. This one I think is really powerful. Is what they see on their Instagram feed accurate? Is it manipulated? How do you know? How do they know? And then why can that be dangerous? You can ask them to compare and contrast adaptations of stories in film or on TV. That one's a lot of fun. And then all the way at the top, ask them to create something. You can use pop culture to inspire really creative tasks in your classroom. And that encourages the highest order thinking skill of creation. You can ask them to remix a song. You can ask them to make their own adaptation, write about a pop culture phenomenon. The sky's the limit. What I love about these ideas that we've discussed is that when pop culture is the content, you can shift the focus to the thinking skills and really get at them better. You know, you might have students in your class who might be thrown off by or disinterested by the traditional classroom content, but we can still get them to practice those important thinking skills when we make pop culture the content. And then you as the educator also have the opportunity to notice any gaps in understanding a lot more easily. I think that's really powerful. So Randy, I'm going to pass it over to you and you can tell us a little bit more about how we do all this in the classroom in a deliberate way.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. Those were some excellent suggestions and ideas, especially regarding the higher order thinking skills. So now that we are thinking about our students, let's think about how we can better reach them and intentionally use pop culture in our classrooms. As you consider how to incorporate pop culture into your classroom, your guiding question should always be this: does this help me effectively teach this topic? So maybe we're not really talking about pop culture anymore, but instead we're focusing on this. How do we create assignments, lessons, activities, and connections using students' interests? And how do we let our students teach us? I mentioned at the beginning how we need to give ourselves more credit, and it's no different with our students. This generation is inspiring a lot of people. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has inspired people young and old and all around the world to speak up about the need to protect the planet. Another example that you can see here is in the photo in the middle. It is featuring the founding members of a group called Teens for Equality, who organized a peaceful protest that drew a crowd of 10,000 people. That's incredible. And whenever they organized this, they were only 14 to 16 years old. They recognized the power of their own voices and knew to act when maybe some others weren't. So stories about these youth circulate on mass media and social media, and we were able to easily find out about what teenagers deemed important. So when you ask your students to make connections to their own world, their own interests, you can let the students guide you into making your connections even more relevant. So how can you incorporate pop culture in the classroom? Well, if you can't tell, we love Star Wars, and I think that it can be used in a variety of academic settings. So we always practice what we preach, and I would be remiss if we didn't include our own pop culture references throughout our session today. So this meme fits perfectly with today's topics. So on the slide, you can see a fun infographic that features curriculum connections. And just so you know, you can download this resource from the blog. Some of my favorite connections include rewriting song lyrics for historical or current events, creating memes in foreign languages, and analyzing character development in favorite television shows or movies. So Vanessa, would you like to share a few additional student work samples and some other ideas?
Yes, and I love those ideas, Randy. Let me tell you about some of my favorites. Surprise, surprise, Star Wars is also one of the entire Star Wars franchise, right? Addresses so many themes, some of which are highlighted here. You have the classic good versus evil. You also have the study of power dynamics. And what I really like is some of the more recent franchise stories or more female centric. So we love using Star Wars. Also, like you, I love asking students to write new lyrics to popular songs. You can see some examples here, and ask them to write lyrics that reflect your content. That can be really fun. In one of our assignments, we asked students to add a more current verse to the "We Didn't Start the Fire" song by Billy Joel. And you can see a couple of examples of verses here that I think really highlight some recent people and events well. I like Kennedy. Their response here asks some rhetorical questions and slyly incorporates their own experience. And then we also have Lily. And I really like that Lily was able to successfully squeeze in as many references as she could into each line. Another favorite I have is, let's bring science into it. Ask students to analyze the science found in almost any action or sci-fi movie today. Asking them, could that really happen, is a great activity. You could ask them, are some of the ideas in these movies really that far-fetched? Could someone survive on Mars by growing potatoes? It's a lot of fun. And then my last favorite, I think it really highlights the power of student voices. And I really love this one. For your students who think they are too young to care about voting or too cool to care about voting, ask them to consider then, what are they doing when they review a product or like their friends' posts? That is very powerful. Getting them to see the significance of their voice, even when they don't really think that it matters, and using something that isn't as high stakes as determining our elected officials will help them to start make those connections. So let's recap some of the places we can find pop culture to give you additional ideas for how to incorporate pop culture into your own classroom. Look for pop culture in film and television, current events, music, advertising and marketing, humor, video games, and social media. Now, what about using pop culture on programs or in the field, Randy?
That is a great question. I recognize that it might be a little bit weird to think about travel right now, but our wanderlust can be used to spark some planning ideas. Connecting students to your travel program using popular culture can immediately get students excited and allow them to explore their interests. This relates back to who decides what is popular, and it can have some stark geographic differences. What is popular in Toronto differs from Vancouver, which differs from London. You can start off with an initial comparison. What is popular in your local area, and how does that differ from your program destination? Some questions you can ask. What are some differences in pop culture references? How is your destination portrayed in pop culture? How do people's interests in sports or food differ? What are the different cultural norms? How are products and events advertised? If you're looking for some project ideas about how to connect pop culture to your destination, your students could create an advertisement for food, itinerary sites, hotels, or differing beliefs and perspectives. They could use concepts as the subject for a photo scavenger hunt. So imagine asking students to take photos that represent freedom, conservation, preservation, innovation, or honor. They could create a soundtrack or a mixtape from your program, which could be a lot of fun. They could also do a deep dive into something or some place that they will visit. So this will help prepare them before they even go on their program. And students can also share details about their program once they return using a variety of mediums. They could create commercials or podcasts or a social media album or story, collage, or other type of presentation. There's a lot out there to choose from. There are a lot of options, and getting students to make those connections and comparisons before their program will help them have a richer experience when they are at the destination. And remember, we may have students on our programs who are savvy travelers, who may have already been to your destination, or who may have more stamps in their passport than you. We may also have students who have never been on a plane before. So regardless of our students' experiences, we must prepare them for travel and experiences outside the classroom, traditional classroom. In using popular culture, your students may just find something new to deem popular.
I
Vanessa?
love that. I love that. Randy. Yeah, to conclude our presentation, I want to leave you with some final tips to guide you as you come up with your own specific ways to engage your group of learners in meaningful and relevant ways. So first of all, self-reflection and preparation goes a long way. Before introducing pop culture into your lessons, consider your classroom, your content, and your students' day-to-day situations, and do some of your own self-reflection as well. And then Randy shared with us some great definitions of pop culture. Check your definition. Remember, pop culture comes in local flavors. What is popular and relevant to students in one part of the country or grade level may not resonate in another. Consider how your students' communities and socially constructed identities shape the kinds of pop culture they are exposed to and consume. Keep learning your students' interests. As we talked about before, introducing pop culture in the classroom is a great way to allow students to bring their own interests into the classroom. Let them be the experts and teach you. Always great to have a plan, and this is no different. As you're thinking of ideas, developing lesson plans, keep this question in mind. Does this help me to more effectively teach the lesson objectives to my specific population of students? And then examine pop culture connections for appropriate relevance and tone. Look for opportunities to make connections. And once you start looking at pop culture through the lens of your classroom, the opportunities will be endless. So it's about shifting our perspective on pop culture. And that's when we realize how it can be such a meaningful resource for learning. Lastly, go beyond your classroom. Students really need to see the importance of an assignment beyond the classroom. And we have to be prepared to explain the real world application of our content. Push students to critique and to analyze and not just consume pop culture. We're excited to see what you come up with.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time and everything that you are doing for your students. We hope that you have a new perspective on popular culture and that you see this topic as another way to encourage lifelong learning. Most importantly, we hope that we've sparked a few ideas about how you can further engage with your students this year. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach us via email. Our email is there on the screen. We would love to hear from you and to hear how you are incorporating pop culture in your classroom. So once again, thank you.
Thank you.